Before we descend into the dark night of Havenwood, where chilling mysteries await, I have a small message. If you love gripping stories, heart-pounding investigations, and killers who spread terror, consider subscribing or following, so you won't miss out on more thrilling content. Your support is the very motivation that drives me to keep bringing you the most unforgettable experiences. Now then, let's step into the story. The small town of Havenwood, nestled amongst the emerald embrace of the Olympic National Forest in Washington state, had always prided itself on its tranquility. Its name was a testament to its nature. A safe harbor, a place where the clamor of the city faded into the gentle symphony of rustling leaves and distant bird calls. Homes, each a testament to comfortable living, dotted the landscape, their lights casting warm, inviting glows against the encroaching dusk. Children rode bikes down elm-lined streets, their laughter echoing in the crisp autumn air. It was the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked, where neighbors knew each other's names, and where the biggest scandal usually involved a misplaced garden gnome. That illusion of peace shattered on a cool Tuesday morning, the kind where the dew still clung stubbornly to the grass and a faint mist hugged the foothills. Dr. Evelyn Reed, a beloved local pediatrician known for her boundless energy and infectious smile, failed to show up for her morning clinic. Her absence, initially met with mild concern, quickly escalated to alarm when her usually punctual assistant, Mrs. Gable, found Evelyn's front door ajar. Detective Miles Corbin, a man whose weary eyes had seen too much for a town like Havenwood, received the call while nursing a lukewarm coffee in his cluttered office at the Havenwood Police Department. He was a man carved from the Pacific Northwest landscape itself, rugged, stoic, with a salt and pepper beard that spoke of years weathered by rain and sorrow. His partner, Detective Sarah Jenkins, a sharp, ambitious young woman who still carried the idealism Havenwood once embodied, was already en route. The scene at Dr. Reed's sprawling craftsman-style home was disturbingly pristine, almost artful in its horror. Evelyn lay in her living room, arranged on a plush Persian rug as if in repose. Her eyes, wide and unseeing, stared up at the intricate patterns of the ceiling. There were no signs of forced entry, no struggle, no overturned furniture. Her silken nightgown was undisturbed, save for the dark, bruising marks around her neck, a chillingly precise garroting. A small, intricately carved wooden bird, a peregrine falcon with wings outstretched, rested delicately on her chest, its dark obsidian eyes seemingly mirroring the victim's own. No signs of struggle, Miles, Sarah observed, her voice barely a whisper, the usual assertiveness replaced by a tremor of disbelief. It's too clean. Miles knelt beside the body, his gloved hand hovering over the cold skin. He'd seen death in various forms, but this felt different. It lacked the chaotic anger of a domestic dispute, the desperate haste of a robbery gone wrong. This was calculated, deliberate. The bird, in particular, unnerved him. It wasn't just a calling card. It felt like a statement. Forensics swarmed the house, a sterile ballet of meticulous collection. Fingerprints were lifted, fibers sampled, photographs taken from every conceivable angle. Dr. Emily Chun, the lead medical examiner, confirmed the cause of death as asphyxiation. Extremely precise, Miles, she noted, her voice clinical but her eyes betraying a hint of unease. No defensive wounds. She was either surprised or incapacitated. The news spread like wildfire through Havenwood. Dr. Reed, of all people, the woman who had brought half the town's children into the world, who had soothed countless anxieties with her calm demeanor and gentle wisdom. The shock was palpable, quickly giving way to a nascent fear. Doors that had always been open were now locked. Children's laughter was replaced by a nervous quiet. Miles and Sarah delved into Evelyn's life. A successful career, a loving but recently deceased husband, no known enemies, no significant debts. She was, by all accounts, a pillar of the community, a benevolent soul. The more they dug, the more perfect her life seemed, making her murder all the more baffling, all the more terrifying in its apparent randomness. Who would want to hurt Evelyn Reed? Sarah mused, flipping through case files late into the night. It makes no sense. There's no motive, no connection. Miles stared at the crime scene photos, particularly at the wooden bird. Maybe the motive isn't about her, Sarah. Maybe it's about us, or what she represents. 3 days later, the town was still reeling when the second body was discovered. This time, it was Arthur Henderson, a retired high school history teacher and an avid birdwatcher, found in his meticulously manicured garden, just 2 miles from Evelyn Reed's home. Like Evelyn, he was found in a state of unsettling repose, the same precise strangulation marks, and on his chest, another intricately carved wooden bird and owl, its silent gaze fixed on the heavens. The panic that had been simmering beneath Havenwood's placid surface now boiled over. 2 murders, unconnected victims, the same chilling signature. Havenwood was no longer a haven. It was a hunting ground. The local media descended, their cameras and microphones thrusting into the faces of distraught residents, turning their fear into sound bites. National news outlets soon followed, painting a grim picture of a small town gripped by an inexplicable terror. The term serial killer began to be whispered, then openly declared. Miles, overwhelmed by the scale and the sheer malevolence of the crimes, reached out. The FBI's Seattle field office responded, sending Agent Lena Petrova. Lena was everything Miles wasn't: sleek, sharp, with an intensity that bordered on relentless. She had a background in behavioral analysis and a reputation for cracking impossible cases. Her presence, while a welcome addition of resources, also highlighted the grim reality. Havenwood was facing a monster far beyond its local police force's experience. Lena's first impression of Miles was one of weary competence. His office, a testament to years of fighting mundane crime, was now the nerve center for something far from it. Her first impression of Havenwood was of a town suffocating under the weight of its own shattered innocence. "The MO is consistent," Lena stated, her voice calm and analytical, as she reviewed the initial reports with Miles and Sarah. No forced entry, no defensive wounds, precise garroting. The ritualistic placement of the victim, the carved bird. This is an organized offender. Someone with planning, control, and likely a significant degree of psychopathy. Organized or not, he's a ghost, Miles grumbled, rubbing his temples. No witnesses, no leads. Even the CCTV footage from the surrounding areas is clean. It's like he materializes and then vanishes. Lena leaned forward, her gaze piercing. That's part of the control, detective. He knows what he's doing. He studies his victims, their routines, their vulnerabilities. He wants to be elusive. He wants to create fear, yes, but also a sense of awe, perhaps even respect, for his cunning. The victims seem to share no obvious connection. Evelyn Reed, the pediatrician. Arthur Henderson, the retired teacher. One a woman, one a man. Different ages, different social circles. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit began to work on a profile. They theorized a male, likely intelligent, meticulous, and suffering from a deep-seated grievance or delusion. The birds were crucial. Were they symbolic of freedom, of being caged, of an observer? As the days turned into a week, the pressure mounted. Miles felt the weight of the town's fear pressing down on him. Every unanswered question was a potential new victim. Every locked door was a silent accusation. The once bustling main street of Havenwood was now desolate after dark. The vibrant community had retreated behind drawn blinds, their trust in the world irrevocably broken. Then came the letter. It arrived at the Havenwood Police Department, addressed simply to the keepers of the peace. It was typewritten, impeccably spaced, and delivered in a pristine, unmarked envelope. Miles opened it with gloved hands, Lena and Sarah looking over his shoulder. The text was chilling in its eloquence, its tone intellectual and unsettlingly detached. To the diligent guardians of Havenwood, a township I once believed held the purity of its namesake, yet now reveals itself as merely another gilded cage, another stage for the mundane. You seek answers, yet you look through clouded lenses, perceiving only the surface, the ripple, never the profound, swirling depths beneath. You mourn the innocent, the beloved, as if their public personas are the sum of their being. Evelyn Reed, the healer of the young, whose hands brought life, yet whose judgment, in its quiet sanctimony, often condemned. Arthur Henderson, the venerated educator, whose words shaped minds, yet whose gaze, I recall, often dismissed the very truth he purported to teach. Do not mistake my actions for random cruelty, nor for the mere indulgence of a base urge. I am not a monster born of chaos, but a sculptor of consequence, an architect of revelation. I merely expose the silent rot beneath your perfectly manicured lawns, the hidden fractures in your idyllic facades. The birds, you ponder? They are not merely signatures, dear detectives. They are omens, symbols of the spirits I liberate. Each one, a unique essence, now free from the confines of societal expectation, of the quiet hypocrisies that bind us all. They soar, unburdened by the earthly ties that dragged them down. They observe as I observe. You call me a killer. I am merely a catalyst. You call this a crime. I call it justice, or perhaps a necessary cleansing. A return to a more elemental truth, a stark reminder that even in Havenwood, the darkest shadows are often cast by the brightest lights. Do not pursue me with the primitive tools of your understanding. Your logic is a blunt instrument against the intricate tapestry I weave. Instead, look inward. Look at the shadows within your own haven, for they are far more pervasive and far more telling than any fingerprints or fibers you might find. The silence will not last forever. The symphony is far from complete, and with each note, another truth shall be unveiled. Yours in observation, the Nocturne Strangler. The letter ended there, without a date, without a precise location. The sheer arrogance, the intellectual conceit, sent a shiver down Miles's spine. This wasn't just a killer. This was someone with a philosophy, a twisted ideology. He wasn't just taking lives, he was making a statement. He's taunting us, Sarah whispered, her face pale. He wants us to understand him, to validate him. Lena's expression was grim. He wants to control the narrative. He wants to be seen as more than just a killer. He sees himself as an agent of change, a judge, jury, and executioner, and the most dangerous kind, one who believes he is righteous. Miles stared at the letter, then at the map of Havenwood spread across his desk. The quiet, peaceful town now felt like a stage, its inhabitants unwitting actors in a gruesome play. The killer had given himself a name, the Nocturne Strangler, and he had promised that the symphony was far from complete. The stillness before the storm had passed. The storm had arrived, and Havenwood was utterly unprepared for its relentless fury. The search for a ghost had become a desperate race against an unseen, self-appointed god. The arrival of the letter from the Nocturne Strangler plunged Havenwood into a deeper abyss of fear and confusion. The public, already on edge, now grappled with the chilling realization that the killer was not just a silent predator, but an articulate, philosophical menace. The letter, leaked to the press by an anonymous source within days, transformed the local tragedy into a national obsession. Talk shows debated the killer's twisted manifesto. Psychologists offered profiles, some sensational, others eerily accurate. Havenwood became a symbol, not of peace, but of encroaching darkness. For Detective Miles Corbin and Agent Lena Petrova, the letter was a double-edged sword. It confirmed the killer's calculated intelligence and provided invaluable insights into his warped psyche, but it also ramped up the pressure to an unbearable degree. Every passing minute felt like a countdown to another victim. He craves recognition, even admiration, Lena explained to a somber task force gathered in the Havenwood Community Hall, now repurposed as a temporary command center. Maps of the town, victim photos, and complex flowcharts covered every available surface. His self-perception as a sculptor of consequence or catalyst is crucial. He doesn't see himself as evil, but as righteous, correcting perceived imbalances or hypocrisies. This makes him incredibly dangerous because his actions are justified in his own mind. The investigative teams, a blend of Havenwood PD and FBI agents, worked around the clock, fueled by coffee and a gnawing sense of urgency. They meticulously cross-referenced everything. Known local grievances, public figures who might have been perceived as sanctimonious, old legal cases, even local community drama. Yet, Evelyn Reed and Arthur Henderson still seemed to have no discernible link beyond their shared status as respected community members. Days bled into a week, then another without a new attack. The absence of a new victim, rather than offering relief, created a suffocating tension. Was he watching, waiting, enjoying the fear he had sown? The town was a ghost of its former self. Children were kept indoors, curfews were self-imposed, and the once vibrant local businesses struggled as people avoided public spaces. Miles found himself haunted by the killer's words. Look at the shadows within your own haven. Was there something he was missing, some deeper, unspoken truth about Havenwood that the killer was exploiting? He started walking the streets at night, not just on patrol, but as if searching for an invisible fault line, a hidden crack in the town's polished veneer. Then the third victim. This time, it was Martha Thorne, a reclusive but well-respected historian and archivist for the Havenwood Historical Society. Her body was found in the Society's dimly lit reading room, surrounded by dusty tomes and ancient maps. Like the others, she was posed, her features serene despite the corroding marks. On her chest, a small, dark wooden raven, its head tilted as if listening to forgotten whispers. The choice of Martha Thorne was a cruel twist. She was not a public figure like Evelyn or Arthur. She lived quietly, dedicated to preserving Havenwood's past. Her death sent a ripple of profound unease through the community. If even the quietest, most unassuming citizens were targets, who was truly safe? The raven, with its symbolism of secrets, knowledge, and sometimes death, was particularly unsettling to Lena. He's escalating, she noted, examining the crime scene photos. The choice of victims is becoming more symbolic. Evelyn, the healer. Arthur, the teacher. Martha, the keeper of history. He's striking at the very fabric of the community, trying to dismantle its perceived virtues. The new victim finally provided a tenuous link. Martha Thorne, in her role as the town archivist, had spent decades delving into Havenwood's past. She had access to old town records, forgotten land disputes, and family histories that might contain the very shadows the killer referenced. Miles remembered a small, obscure historical article Martha had published years ago, detailing the contentious founding of Havenwood, a story of land grabs, betrayals, and suppressed truths that painted a far less idyllic picture than the official narrative. He had dismissed it as academic curiosity at the time. Now it felt like a chilling clue. What if the connection isn't about who they are now, but what they knew or what they represented from the town's history? Miles proposed to Lena, pointing to the old article. Evelyn's family roots go back to one of the founding families. Arthur taught local history, and Martha, well, she was the history. Lena's eyes lit up with a flicker of excitement. That fits the exposing silent rot rhetoric. He's not targeting them for personal slights, but for their perceived roles in upholding or obscuring a deeper historical injustice within Havenwood itself. The birds aren't just freeing their spirits. They're symbols tied to the nature of the hidden truth he believes they represent. The task force shifted gears, diving into Havenwood's archives. Old property deeds, town council meeting minutes from the early 20th century, local newspaper articles from forgotten scandals, anything Martha Thorne might have researched or had access to. The sheer volume of information was daunting, but they were desperate. Sarah Jenkins, with her fresh perspective and relentless energy, took the lead on the historical deep dive. She meticulously pieced together narratives of old rivalries, land disputes that went ugly, and quiet shames buried beneath generations of respectability. She discovered a particularly bitter land dispute from the 1920s involving a powerful logging family, the Callahans, and a smaller, less influential family named the Millers. The Millers had lost their ancestral land under questionable circumstances, leading to their eventual exodus from Havenwood, their name disappearing from local records. The official story presented it as a legitimate purchase. Martha Thorne's old research hinted at coercion and betrayal. Could this be it? A century-old grievance finally erupting in a wave of modern terror? Meanwhile, Lena focused on the psychological profile, now refined with the new information. The killer was likely someone deeply connected to Havenwood, perhaps even a descendant of those wronged in the past. He was highly intelligent, well-read, and likely felt a profound sense of injustice, perhaps even an ancestral burden. He would be meticulous, patient, and blend seamlessly into the community. He would be an invisible man, someone overlooked, underestimated, or simply not noticed. The investigation led them down multiple frustrating avenues. They interviewed descendants of the Callahan family, now prominent members of Havenwood, some still wealthy, others having long moved away. All had airtight alibis. They interviewed anyone who had worked with Martha, particularly on controversial historical projects. More dead ends. The killer remained a phantom. As the pressure mounted, Miles found himself sleeping less, his mind a relentless churn of clues and possibilities. He remembered an old Havenwood legend Martha had once mentioned, about a particularly cruel raven that was said to guard a hidden, poisoned spring, a local cautionary tale about secrets that fester and corrupt. It felt eerily relevant. One evening, staring at a blurred image from a distant security camera near Arthur Henderson's house, a fleeting glimpse of a dark figure in the early morning mist, Miles noticed something. A faint shimmer, almost imperceptible, near the figure's hand. He zoomed in, enhanced the image. It was a faint metallic glint. Not a weapon, but something smaller, reflective. He shared it with Lena. "What do you make of this?" "Could be anything. A watch, a ring." Lena's brow furrowed. "Or a tool. Something used to carve those birds." They expanded their search, reviewing hours of old footage, poring over Martha Thorne's recent research notes. Sarah, exhausted but resolute, finally stumbled upon a series of cryptic journal entries in Martha's archive. They weren't meant for public consumption, but rather Martha's personal reflections, detailing her growing concern about a shadowy figure who had been asking unusual questions about the Callahan-Miller dispute, particularly about a missing piece of evidence, an old, forged land deed that had mysteriously vanished from the archives decades ago. Martha had described this figure as unassuming, almost forgettable, yet with eyes that burned with an ancient, unforgiving fire. She hadn't named him, only referred to him as the archivist's shadow. The last entry, dated just 2 days before her death, read, "He knows. He knows I am close to the truth. The raven calls. I fear it will soon call for me." The missing forged deed. The metallic glint on the camera. The description of an unassuming man. And the name, the archivist's shadow, a chilling parallel to the Nocturne Strangler. Miles felt a surge of adrenaline, cold and sharp. He's connected to the archives. He was after that deed. He wanted to ensure the truth remained buried, or perhaps, to use it for his own twisted revelation. Lena immediately dispatched teams to search all remaining historical documents. Any leads Martha might have left. They finally found it, a hidden compartment in Martha's personal desk, concealed behind a false back. Inside, a brittle, yellow document. The original forged land deed, dated 1928, proving the Callahans had indeed swindled the Millers out of their land through deceit. And tucked inside the deed, a small, laminated photo. It showed Martha Thorne, years younger, standing next to a young man in his late teens, both smiling proudly in front of a historical society exhibit. The young man had a distinct, almost haunting intensity in his eyes. On the back, Martha had written, "Elias Thorne, my most dedicated volunteer, and a descendant of the Miller line." So much history in his hands. The name hit Miles like a physical blow. Elias Thorne. Thorne. Martha Thorne. Was there a familial connection? A sick irony? They quickly pulled up all records for an Elias Thorne in Havenwood. He was an unremarkable man in his early 40s, a quiet librarian at the local public library, a seemingly solitary figure, known for his meticulous organization and his vast knowledge of local history. He lived in a small, well-kept house on the outskirts of town, inherited from his maternal grandmother, a Thorne. She was a Miller by birth. The puzzle pieces snapped into place with a horrifying click. Elias Thorne, a quiet man living in the shadows of a family legacy of injustice, had meticulously planned his cleansing of Havenwood. He had been a volunteer at the Historical Society, meaning he would have known Martha Thorne, her research, and the existence of the forged deed. He would have known Evelyn Reed and Arthur Henderson as pillars of the community that, in his eyes, represented the very system that had wronged his ancestors. The metallic glint in the surveillance photo? Elias Thorne was known for his hobby of intricate woodworking. He even ran a small online store selling his carved birds. A search of his online profiles revealed dozens of detailed, artistic bird carvings, including peregrine falcons, owls, and ravens. "He's been under our noses the entire time," Miles said, the realization a bitter taste in his mouth. The quiet librarian, the one no one notices, the perfect invisible man. Lena nodded, her face etched with a grim determination. "He's a ghost no longer, but he knows we're close. He'll be ready for us. And he still has that deep-seated need for his symphony to be complete. We need to move fast. Before he finds his next victim, before he makes his final, grand statement." The hunt for the Nocturne Strangler was no longer a desperate search for an unknown entity. It was a precise, calculated pursuit of a very real, very dangerous man. A man who believed he was wielding ancestral justice, and who was about to compose his terrifying final movement. The revelation of Elias Thorne as the Nocturne Strangler sent a seismic shockwave through the Havenwood investigation. The unassuming librarian, the quiet man known for his gentle demeanor and encyclopedic knowledge of local history, was now unmasked as a cold, calculating killer. The irony was brutal, almost poetic in its cruelty, perfectly aligning with Thorne's twisted perception of hidden truths. Miles, Lena, and Sarah pored over every detail of Elias Thorne's life. His home, a modest bungalow on the town's periphery, became the immediate focus. SWAT teams surrounded it discreetly, but intelligence from the local library confirmed he hadn't shown up for his shift that morning. He was gone. The bird had flown. "He knew," Lena stated, her voice tight with frustration. "He must have been watching or had a contingency plan for when we got too close. He's meticulous. He wouldn't leave anything to chance." The search intensified. Miles deployed every available officer to scour the town, check bus stations, airports, and major roads. Roadblocks were set up. A bolo, be on the lookout, was issued for Elias Thorne. Havenwood, already a town under siege, was now in full lockdown. The media, catching wind of the suspect's identity, exploded with renewed frenzy. The face of the quiet librarian stared out from every screen, every newspaper. Back at the command center, Sarah continued her deep dive into the Thorne/Miller family history. She discovered Elias's grandmother, Elara Miller, had been particularly vocal about the land dispute, believing her family had been unjustly swindled. She had instilled in Elias, her only grandchild, a profound sense of ancestral grievance. Elara had passed away just 2 years prior, a date that coincided chillingly with a noticeable shift in Elias's online activity from general woodworking forums to dark history discussion groups and forums discussing vigilante justice. His grandmother fueled his resentment, Sarah reported, showing them old photos of Elara, her face etched with a lifelong bitterness. When she died, it seems that her pain, her unresolved anger, was passed directly to him. He became her instrument of revenge. Lena, meanwhile, focused on Thorne's online footprint. Beyond his woodworking, she found a series of increasingly disturbing posts under an anonymous handle on fringe history forums, discussing historical injustices, the impotence of legal systems, and the need for true reckonings. One specific post, dated months before the first murder, read, "Sometimes, the roots of a tree must be poisoned to purge the fruit of its rot, and only a master gardener knows where to strike." He's not just avenging his family, Lena concluded. He's enacting a distorted form of social justice, purifying Havenwood of what he perceives as its foundational sins. The victims were symbolic, yes, but also, in his mind, connected to the families that benefited from the original injustice, or those who upheld the false narrative. They finally gained entry to Thorn's house. It was impeccably clean, almost sterile. No signs of forced entry, no obvious clues. Yet, the air hung heavy with a sense of methodical emptiness. In his study, they found hundreds of meticulously organized books on local history, forestry, and ornithology. On his desk, a half-finished carving of a rare, soaring eagle, and next to it a small, leather-bound journal. Miles picked it up, his gloves brushing against the cool leather. The journal, written in elegant, precise script, detailed Elias's descent into his twisted philosophy. It chronicled his grandmother's stories, his growing obsession with the Miller-Callahan injustice, and his own perceived indignities he felt at the hands of Havenwood's elite. He described his victims not as people, but as nodes of corruption, tethers to the lie, each death a symphonic note in his grand requiem for Havenwood. The final entry, dated the previous evening, was chilling. They are close. The keepers of the peace have finally begun to glimpse the truth I have woven. But they are still blind to the crescendo. Havenwood will understand, at last, the depth of its deception. The obsidian shadow will fall upon the town's truest shame, and only then will the symphony be complete. The final bird awaits its flight. The oldest tree, the deepest roots. The truth, in its rawest form, will finally be revealed. The oldest tree, the deepest roots. Miles murmured, his mind racing. What does that mean? Where's Havenwood's deepest root? Sarah, pale but resolute, pointed to an ancient, gnarled oak tree depicted on an old map of Havenwood's original town square. The founder's oak, Miles. It's right next to the original site of the first town hall, where the first land deeds were signed. It's the oldest living thing in Havenwood that bears witness to its founding. Lena's eyes widened. And what's near the founder's oak, Sarah? The old Miller homestead, Sarah replied, her voice catching. The land they lost. It's now the site of the Havenwood Community Center, but the original foundation is still there, beneath the new building. It's where the Miller family's story began and ended in Havenwood. The final bird, the obsidian shadow, the town's truest shame. It all pointed to one place. The Havenwood Community Center, built atop the very land that was once the heart of the Miller family's existence. Thorn wasn't just going to commit another murder. He was planning a symbolic act of grand scale, a public unveiling of the truth at the very heart of the town. Miles felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. He's going to make a spectacle. He's going to strike at the center of Havenwood, literally. They raced to the Havenwood Community Center, sirens screaming through the now deserted streets. The building, usually bustling with activity, was eerily silent. It was late afternoon, and the center would be empty, closing for the day. Perfect for a killer who craved an audience, even if only the echoes of one. As they approached, they saw it. A small, black flag, emblazoned with a crudely drawn obsidian bird, fluttering from the highest point of the community center's flagpole. A chilling declaration. Miles, Lena, and a tactical team cautiously entered the building. The air was thick with dust and the scent of old wood. Every creak, every shadow, seemed to hold a threat. They moved systematically, clearing rooms, their weapons raised. They found him in the main assembly hall, a large, open space used for town meetings and public events. Elias Thorn stood on the stage, bathed in the last sliver of golden sunlight filtering through the tall windows. He wasn't armed with a gun, but with an old, gnarled piece of wood and a set of carving tools, meticulously working on his final bird. On a pedestal beside him, in a macabre display, were the forged deed, Martha Thorn's journal, and the 3 carved birds from his previous victims. The peregrine falcon, the owl, the raven. They were arranged around a 4th empty space, and standing silently, fearfully, tied to a chair at the center of the stage, was Mayor Thompson, the current head of Havenwood, a direct descendant of the Callahan family, and a symbol of everything Elias Thorn despised. The final victim, the deepest root. Elias, put down the tools. Miles shouted, his voice echoing through the vast hall. The tactical team spread out, forming a semicircle. Elias Thorn looked up, his eyes burning with an almost manic intensity. Yet his voice was calm, almost conversational. "Detective Corbin, Agent Petrova, you found me. Took you long enough. But you see, you were looking for a criminal. I am merely a storyteller, bringing to light the final chapter of Havenwood's true history." He gestured to the forged deed. "This document, the cornerstone of your perfect town, built on lies, on theft, on the eradication of my family's very existence here." He pointed to Mayor Thompson. "And he, the living embodiment of that lie, the inheritor of ill-gotten gains, who perpetuates the myth of Havenwood's purity." "This isn't justice, Elias," Lena countered, her voice firm, attempting to de-escalate. "This is murder. You've brought terror, not truth, to this town." Thorne laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Terror is merely the chisel, Agent. Carves away the complacency. The truth, in its rawest form, is rarely gentle. It demands attention. It demands blood, sometimes." He held up the half-finished carving. "This, detective, is the Obsidian Falcon, the embodiment of unwavering justice, of ancestral sight. It will be the final touch on my masterpiece." He lifted a carving tool, poised to strike the mayor. "And with this, Havenwood will truly be cleansed, its false heart exposed for all eternity." Miles knew he had to act. He saw the cold resolve in Thorne's eyes, the unshakable conviction. This was not a man who could be reasoned with. "Elias, what about Alara? What would your grandmother say about this? About the pain you're causing?" Miles tried, a desperate gambit, recalling Sarah's research. Thorne paused, his hand trembling slightly. A flicker of something, perhaps genuine sorrow, crossed his face, quickly replaced by a steely resolve. She would say, "The seeds of truth must be watered, even if with blood." As he raised his hand again, a single shot rang out. Not from Miles or Lena, but from a sharpshooter positioned on the roof who had a clear view through a high window. The shot hit Thorne's arm, sending the carving tool clattering to the stage floor. Thorne cried out, more in anger than pain, dropping the half-finished bird carving. Before the tactical team could reach him, he made a desperate lunge, not towards them, but towards a hidden mechanism behind the stage backdrop. A flash of something reflective, a glint of metal. Miles realized his intent. Thorne wasn't trying to escape. He was trying to make a final, destructive statement. He was after a lever that would trigger something. Miles yelled, "Hit the lights! Get the mayor out!" Chaos erupted. The tactical team moved in, securing Mayor Thompson. Lena rushed towards Thorne, tackling him just as he reached the lever. A struggle ensued, raw and visceral. Thorne, despite his arm injury, fought with a feral strength, fueled by years of pent-up resentment. He managed to activate the lever. A low, rumbling sound echoed through the hall. Dust rained from the ceiling. A section of the main stage, where Thorne's macabre display stood, began to descend, revealing a gaping hole into the old foundation beneath the community center, the very foundation of the old Miller homestead. Thorne had rigged it to expose the true roots of Havenwood. As the police finally subdued and cuffed Elias Thorne, the dust settled. The stage had partially collapsed, revealing a cavernous space below, filled with fragments of old stone walls and overgrown roots, the ghost of the Miller home, now starkly exposed to the light. The meticulously arranged historical items, including the forged deed and Thorne's journal, lay scattered amidst the debris. The unfinished obsidian falcon lay broken, its wings snapped. Miles and Lena stood over the subdued killer, whose eyes still burned with an unrepentant fire. "You didn't win, Elias," Miles said, his voice heavy. "You just brought more pain." Thorne simply smiled, a chilling, enigmatic grin. "Pain is a temporary teacher, detective. But truth is eternal. Havenwood will never look at itself the same way again. The obsidian heart of its history has been unveiled. My symphony is complete." The arrest of Elias Thorne, the Nocturne Strangler, sent shockwaves across the nation. The story of Havenwood's quiet librarian, driven by ancestral grievance to commit a series of symbolic murders, dominated headlines for weeks. The town itself began a slow, painful process of healing. The exposed foundation beneath the community center became a somber reminder of a past injustice, a permanent scar on the town's idyllic facade. Mayor Thompson, shaken but unharmed, initiated a comprehensive review of Havenwood's historical records and a public reckoning with its past. Monuments were erected, not just to the victims, but to the forgotten Miller family, acknowledging the wrongs of history. Miles Corbin, forever changed by the darkness he had faced, remained Havenwood's chief of police, but with a new, somber understanding of the shadows that can lurk even in the brightest places. Lena Petrova, her mission complete, returned to the FBI, carrying with her the weight of Thorne's twisted philosophy. Sarah Jenkins, now a seasoned detective, dedicated herself to ensuring that history, both good and bad, was never forgotten or twisted. Havenwood slowly began to reclaim its peace, but it was a peace tempered by newfound wisdom, a hard-won understanding that true tranquility comes not from burying the past, but from confronting it, even when its truths are as sharp and dark as obsidian. The echoes of the Nocturne Strangler's Requiem would forever serve as a chilling reminder that sometimes, the most dangerous monsters are not those who hide in the darkest forests, but those who quietly walk among us, their hearts burning with a slow, ancestral fire.